in this lesson, we'll talk about bump maps and how they can give us the illusion of more detail than is really there. So in some of these cases, we want to have some sort of a raised detail on this. So let's say on this hose, for instance, we would like to have maybe these little bits in here raised up and these lines kind of pushed down. Well, we could model that into the hose, but that's going to create a lot of resolution in there for something that's really not that important and probably won't be seen that much. So what we can do is use a bump map to give the illusion of depth. And this works on things that have kind of a small amount of depth that we want to add, things like, skin bumps or scratches. In this case, these lines on the hose. So if we go ahead and just do an IPR of this hose, we get something that is really, really flat. Okay? And so what we want to do is to actually create the idea that that's raised up. And so let's go ahead and jump into the Hypershade. And we want to get the material from the hose. So it's going to be right here. And we'll go ahead and map that out. And so what we want to do is actually create a bump. And so if you open this up, you'll see that there's actually a bump mapping slot opened up here. And so if I jump through here, I can actually create a new grid or any kind of render node and it will attach it. Let's see what that has actually added to our shading network. So if I go ahead and map that out now. So here is the original grid that we've got piped into the color. But now we have not only a new grid that's assigned to our bump, but also a bump 2D node, which is very important. It's what controls the bump. This is where we decide if we want it to use as a bump or as a normal map, which we won't go through, but normal maps are used in things like games, and they're kind of a really powerful bump map. Okay, and so we have the bump node going into the bump, and so let's see what this looks like. And you don't really see much. You can kind of see the lines in here. The reason for that is that it's using that grid. Now for this case, we want to actually use the same grid that we use for the color because we want it to match up. So what I can do is click on this guy, the little line here, and if I hover over it, you can see that it's taking the out alpha of the grid and taking it into the bump value. So let me go ahead and delete this. And here we'll look at doing the same thing we did in the node editor. I'm going to go ahead and middle mouse drag from the grid to the bump 2D, and I can say default, and that's going to go ahead and it knows it's smart enough to take the out alpha to the bump value if I just do default. If I go in here and instead of doing default, go to more, it's going to allow me to figure out what I actually want to take this into. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do sorry, it should have said other instead of more. We're bringing up the connection editor. And so from this, you can see on one side we have the grid, on the other side we have the bump. And so here we can decide what's going to be connected to what. So we want out alpha, and we want that connected into the bump value. Okay, we'll give you the same effect. So here we're using this exact same node, so if we were to change something in here, it's going to change it in the bump and in the color. So now if we take a look at this, you can see that that bump matches up nicely. You can see all those raised pieces there. So the idea with the bump map is the light color, so getting closer to white is going to look raised up, and something dark is going to look raised down. Something about 50% gray is not going to have an effect. So we can come in here on the bump node. We can, if this is too much of an effect, we can go ahead and dial down the bump depth, and you can see that dials it down. If we take it down to 0, it takes that bump away altogether. So we want to just bring it up until we start to get a little bit of that bump effect. Okay, let's look at using bump on another piece of our model here. So let's say that we want to make it look like there's some sort of pipes in these pieces here. So what I want to do is select those polygons. So a neat way that you can do that is go into the UV texture editor, and we already got those separated, so I can go to face, just drag across those faces in the UV texture editor, and those are automatically selected in here. So that's a nice way to select some things. So now we will go into our Hypershade, and I actually want to add a new material. So let's create a new blend material, and let's just call this something like top pipes. and I want to go back and reselect. So let me actually go back into the UV texture editor, select those faces, and then I want to assign this new blend. Okay. Now for this blend, let's go ahead and in the bump, let's actually add a ramp. So add a ramp into the bump. Okay, and let's go ahead and do an IPR render on this side. Okay, so let's go ahead and render that up. Okay, so what I want to do now is go ahead and figure out how I'm going to actually assign this ramp. So right now it's going from top to bottom. I want to change it to in the U direction. Okay, and I also want it to repeat. So I'm going to go ahead under here, and in the repeat U and V, let's start to change some of these values. So I'm going to change some of these, change it to maybe 50, and you can start to see some detail in there. Let's now modify our ramp. So instead of going blue, green, red, I just want to go from the low part of the pipe, kind of a black, back down to that same color. And then in the middle, we'll have kind of a raised color, so something above gray. And we can come in and use smooth, kind of create that. Okay, now we still have a sharp line there on the perimeter. Let me go ahead and turn off the visibility on the platform. Go ahead and hide that. And maybe we can see it a little bit better. So there you can kind of see the bump starting to come in, getting those pipes going. All right, and if we want to change that up, so change the bump value, we can take that down a little bit lower, but I'm going to go ahead and I think keep it up a bit higher. Okay, so now if we just do a render of this, you should see some sort of illusion that there's kind of these pipes going on the back here. Okay, I also want to, before we stop the lesson, I want to go in and actually change this material to that car paint that we added. Okay, and so let me go ahead and again go into the UV texture editor, and this time I'll select these faces here, and I'll come in and deselect those faces. All right, and then we'll add our car paint. Now you can see I've also gone ahead and added material to this, and I've just created a duplicate of the car paint and then used a ramp in the color to drive it from red to gray to red to black to gray to black. So if you jump in here, you can see that ramp in the base color. And then just added a surface shader to the little rods around there. Okay, so let's take a look at what this currently looks like. So we'll just do a quick render, and again, you'll be able to tweak these materials as you actually get into the rendering. This is just kind of to see real quickly what it's looking like. Now yours, again, doesn't have to look exactly like mine. I might add a little bit of black blend here to some of these other large pieces. But in the next lesson, let's take another look at using file textures and how that can be associated with the UVs. And we'll do that on the grill. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next lesson.